Good morning and welcome to Cafecito con Prospanica. This is our weekly space to gather together to raise our voices. We want to spend this short time with you so we can all uncover new ways of thinking about and understanding our current experiences. Today's topic is about as applicable as it could possibly be. It's about pivots, and we're a couple minutes late because we are dealing with some technological difficulties that we have taken some virtual duct tape to and patched everything together, and it's going to be an amazing experience. So thank you for joining me. My name is Evan Cleveland. I'm the director of programs with Prospanica, and you may not know much about Prospanica and who we are, so I'm going to take just a second to let you know some of that. We are a nonprofit association. We support Latino professionals, and what that means is we have chapters across the United States and Puerto Rico, and those chapters have members. And the chapters, that's where a lot of the exciting stuff happens. So what you want to do is if you aren't a member, if you don't know about the organization, go to our website and look at what our chapters are doing. They are being incredibly innovative. They're doing new experiences. For instance, Prospanica Houston just had a Selena themed Loteria event that was virtual. Prospanica Columbus is talking about resumes this week. In Silicon Valley, they're going to be talking about what to do if you feel like you're a culture misfit at work. And there is so much more amazing content happening, ways to get involved, ways to network virtually. So go to prospanica.org. You can click on chapters or you can click on programs and events and find our calendar. Now we're all stuck at home. We're stuck with these Zoom meetings, these go-to meetings, whatever it may be. This is a great chance to still show your Prospanica pride. I have my Generacion Líder shirt on. You can go to proforma.com/prospanica-gear, or you can just go click the store link off of our website. And that'll allow you to purchase not just clothing, but a whole line of material. And really, those proceeds, they go to benefit our foundation. The foundation runs a scholarship program. It provides opportunities like this one to interact. So check it out. Go to the website, buy something, rep it in your meetings online today. Sorry, I got a little distracted. The Blue Angels are currently flying over my house. It's an interesting day. It's an exciting time. Um, I want to say thank you to our longtime partner and supporter, Teach for America. Teach for America is an amazing organization. They believe in the future. They believe in their Latinx leaders, and they believe in these cafecitos. And so I just want to say thank you to Teach for America. All right. Now that we're finally at this point, I want to introduce our two workshop leaders today. Like I said, at this point in time, it kind of can feel like our perspectives just sort of shrink, and we want to run from all the change that is going on. We just want to hide under a rock, but we can't. And we have some amazing people here today who are going to talk about pivots. They're going to talk about how to manage that change, how to leverage the opportunities that we find within it, and how to make sure that you can thrive and feel safe and healthy. So we have Jeffrey Vargas, whom we've seen before on previous Cafecitos. We're also joined with Dr. Fred Soto. So I'm so excited you gentlemen are here today. And I'm going to let you guys take it. So there's Fred. Welcome, Fred. Now we have Jeff by phone, which is a little bit different. So I'll be running Jeff's slides. We're going to be just a little bit more messy today, but we are not hiding under a rock. We are embracing the pivot. Fred, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm excited about being here because now
Excellent.
I have a chance at becoming a Prospanic.
There you go. Wonderful. I love it. And Jeff, I know you're out there. You're a ghost, but we can hear you. How are you doing today, Jeff?
You know what? I didn't realize that we would have to eat our own dog food right away, and practice the power of pivot during the workshop. But in fact, for whatever reason, my computer system has decided to block me from participating. So we will fix that for next time. But I'm super excited to be with all of you and to share some thoughts and ideas today.
Wonderful. And just so you guys know, everyone, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and the Blue Angels are doing a flyover through our city today. So there was a moment ago where
Beautiful.
my house sort of felt like it was a little loud and shaking. That was them flying south to downtown. It's kind of an exciting thing. Remember, you can participate in this webinar. So you have the chat feature. I want you to go ahead and send questions through the chat feature that you want us to talk about. We're going to let Jeff and Fred talk to us and share some ideas, and then we'll come back at the end for some Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and jump off camera and let you guys take it away. Jeff, just let me know when you want to cue a slide to move, and I will take care of it.
Okay, cool. So what's awesome actually is I'm not even actually able to see the slides as well. So we are literally pivoting as we speak, but we're doing it with, as Fred and I will talk about in just a moment, the power of pivot. So you see our first slide is just a little intro slide of the presentation itself. We call that the power of pivot. And what you'll see coming up and this next slide is a couple of guys playing basketball. And when you hit that button, the first word that comes up is pivot. And I want us to stop for a second, because what does pivoting mean to you and I? You know, when we think about it from a basketball point of view, it's pretty clear. You've got a beginning point, you've got an end point, you've got a place that you want to get to. And so you're moving from point A to point B, and you do it intentionally. And reality is, if you move in a way that doesn't work, the referee calls a travel, a walk. You're out of sync. But we understand that the pivot's important because we are stopped from where we want to go, and we need to move in a different direction to meet our goal. That's how it works in basketball. The next slide you'll see is that, you know, we start to have this conversation. Why do we need pivoting skills in and of themselves? Well, I think Evan and the leadership team at Prospanica will tell you that the reason we need to be able to pivot, at least when we look at it from a Latino point of view, is that we are not where we thought we would be, where we need to be, and where we want to be with respect to representation. And so rather than say of where we're not, one of the ideas we could offer up is this is an opportunity for growth. We all can pivot into new and different leadership options and positions. The next slide really just asks us this question: what does pivoting really mean to you and I? And would this surprise you? First, you know, there are 8 different noun definitions of a pivot and 2 different definitions as a verb. So pivoting has a lot of different definitions for sure. So today, one of the things that we're going to talk about is what will we cover? Well, obviously, we're going to cover what is the definition of a pivot. And for you and I, what are some of the thoughts that we have that really help us to understand the power of a pivot? And ultimately, how can we work effectively and efficiently to pivot in an environment that's going to be successful for all of us? So the next slide, how do we define a pivot? Well, for Fred and I, you know, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Fred in just a moment, but for Fred and I, we went back and forth on this definition, and really we think of it as something, a pivot's really an intentional or anticipated or forced movement that takes you and I from where we are to someplace else. And the reality is all of us have pivotal moments. We go to the next slide, we're going to see that, you know, for some of us, you know, we know what those pivots look like. There's a moment to get married. There's a moment to graduate. There's a moment to be promoted. But I'm going to allow us to really experience what I would call a super treat right now, which is the opportunity for us to talk about pivot from the standpoint of one of our great leaders in leadership development and strategic leadership, Dr. Fred Soto. And Fred is really going to talk to us in the next couple of slides about the secret sauce of the power of pivot. So my friend and mentor and leader here, Fred, feel free to pivot and take over.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk about pivoting because my life has been one giant pivot. But I really didn't realize it until Jeffrey started talking to me about pivoting. Pivoting is making a move. Pivoting is changing directions. Check this out. In my life, I have been a professional percussionist. I'm reading from text because it's hard to conceive. A soldier, a minister, a martial arts instructor, personal trainer, club DJ, program director, instructor, consultant, trainer of trainers, professional speakers, CEO of my own business. And to add to that secret sauce, I hold 2 doctorates, several professional certifications. And I mean, it just makes me think I am the pivot. So I'm giving you this from a very human perspective. Opportunities will present themselves. Are you ready to make the move? Because if you're not, this is a good time to get ready, because there's some opportunities are going to be coming up right now, if only we'll recognize it. So what is the power of the pivot, my friend? The power of the pivot is the objective of the pivot. Why we're doing this in the first place. For example, some of us just come to work, we sit at a desk and crank out deliverables. But know this, my friends, there are people among you who have a very clear purpose. They're already thinking about their promotion. They're thinking about their relationships. They're thinking about how much knowledge they're going to get from that environment so they can move on. And it's obvious to me that's taking place because those statistics that Jeffrey just talked about, leave a lot of room. There's a lot of Latin leadership that still needs to be discovered. But we need to put ourselves in a position to discover that, to let them recognize who we are and what we have to offer. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I think you're exactly right, Fred. Pivoting is an opportunity for all of us. And if you go to the next slide, I think it's super important for us to think about how does that pivot really begin. So, Fred, would you share on this slide about what that really looks like?
Well, to me, a pivot begins with four things, and I'm talking about getting ready. You've got to have a desired outcome and an objective. Again, some of us just show up, but there's a lot of people who they already have in mind their next position when they come in. Now, I'm going to stereotype using myself. As a Latino, I tend to work. I come in, I do my job, I work. And I expect everybody to recognize and see that I'm a hard worker. But by now, don't you realize that there are people who are less smart, doing less, but they seem to be advancing more? Oh, so you got to have an outcome. What's next on the bullets, Jeff?
The next
now,
is, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, gathering and sorting information. Talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so here it is. You come into the workplace, right? You have a job description, but what else do you need to know so you can pivot and make the right moves? I'm going to give you a few things. Write these down because they're going to come very quickly. You got to know the mission and the business of the organization. Now, you'll first learn about it in written form. It's called the mission statement or why we're here, etc., yada, yada. But look, you've got to know what that is because that's where the opportunities are. Some are very clear in the form of job descriptions, but others you will create for yourselves. So then we've got to turn that information into knowledge. There's information all over the place, but information needs to be organized, and that's how it becomes knowledge. Let's go a little further with this, because what we also want to do with knowledge is ascend. We need to rise up to the knowledge, and what that means is that knowledge becomes a part of who we are. Now, another word for that is wisdom. That's the smarts. Some people call it street smarts, but it's what you get when you sort out this information. You have a clear desired outcome, and you know how you're going to use that information to get to where you want to go. You must see the opportunity. Jeff?
Yes, sir. We got to be able to see the opportunity. So let's go to the next slide. Because Dr. Soto and I believe that pivoting well is really a process, and it involves 4 different things. First and foremost, and we're going to go through these in just a moment, but you got to protect your wellness. Listen, you can't pivot well. You cannot pivot well if you are not in good mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health. So your wellness is critical. Then we think there are really 4 steps to the pivot process. And so how do you identify and experience those 4 steps? And then you can't just stay there. You got to amp it up, amp up the concept of pivoting. So you're pivoting with power, and then you're unleashing pivoting on your workplace, my workplace, and yours. Let's go to the next slide. So how do how do we actually protect our wellness? A couple of thoughts up front. And Fred will jump in here too. First and foremost, recognize that your Latin experience, whatever that you see that as, positions you well. It positions you to pivot well. And Fred, can you tell us a little bit about why our Latino experience helps us position ourselves well?
Yeah, we are the power in the middle of any situation. Our racial and ethnic diversity position us to respond to many different people. In fact, many different people in two entire languages. Some of us speak three. So the idea is that we are that middle person. We should be able to relate because we have something in common with everybody. We come in all flavors, vanilla to chocolate. That is the Latino X experience. Be blessed with that. Jeff?
And I hope some of you are putting some amens in the chat box from Fred's moment there. But the others just fit as well, right? You got to be good to yourself. Practice this thing called self-forgiveness and grace, especially during moments of time, challenging, pivotal moments. And that make sure that service is really your signature before and after moments of pivot. As Fred mentioned, we are powerful because of our capacity to pivot. And it really comes down to how are we preparing and executing against those pivots, right? It's about how transparent and authentic are we and with respect to those pivots and how do they inform our next steps? And something that all of us can do. In fact, I think all of us should do. In fact, we'll say we're going to challenge you to do before this webinar is over is encourage other people, encourage others during and after super pivotal moments. We'll go to the next slide. And Fred, will you walk us through the 4 steps to pivoting?
Sure. Put them all up so that we can see them all and begin to think about them. First of all, as I said before, we got to recognize the opportunity. Here's why. Because recognition, we're recognizing, but my friends, we are being recognized from the minute we walk in, every time that we're at work. And by the way, this applies online as well. Your voice, what they hear, your words, you are being recognized. So recognize the opportunity because you're being recognized. It's also called your reputation. The next phase is to engage. You cannot go to work thinking that all I have to do is do my job. That is false. It doesn't work on American Idol. It doesn't work on all of these competitions that I watch. People say, I can sing well, that's enough. No, you have to have an ability to engage with other people. In fact, think about it this way. Anywhere you want to go in life will require you to make new friends, new connections. You've got to expand your social influence in order to find that next opportunity. Number 3, you got to get stuff done. Work is going to be placed in front of you. Now, some of you are already saying, I already do the work. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an ability to do the work, keeping in mind that you're being recognized, you need to engage, so collaboration is king in getting stuff done. You have got to be recognized as the person who works well with others, plays well with others. This is the $1,000,000 skill that we have the capacity to do better than anyone else, and in 2 languages. El que habla 2 idiomas vale 2 personas. Adelante. And next, share your results. Don't put your candle under a bushel. A lot of us, we work, and we don't tell people. We don't share the results. The beautiful thing about collaboration is that it gives people a chance to see how you operate in a team. Follow first, prepare for leadership. Share those results. Don't be shy. Let them see your light. Jeff?
All right, excellent. And we can go to the next slide and we can bring up the next 4 things at the same time, because what Dr. Soto said, talked us through is what are the 4 steps to pivoting. But man, we just don't want to stay there. We want to amp up the pivot, right? And so what does it require to amp up the pivot? I'll do the first 2 and Fred will do the next 2. You got to be great at planning. Now, the idea is you have to be able to figure out the beginning, the middle, and the end better than anybody else. And leading, the real secret sauce of leading is how good are you as a follower? Because at the end of the day, people want to know that they're following you, not because of the position that some organization gave you, but it's because of the content, position, enthusiasm, and encouragement you give somebody else. Go ahead, Fred.
So when we delegate, there's old school thinking that says, well, delegate, you do it. You pass it on to somebody else. Delegating is not passing a task. It is empowering someone to accomplish a task. So when you share a task, you should also share the learning that goes with it, the relationship they need to have to succeed, the online and offline resources that they need to succeed. So delegating is not just telling people to do something, it is empowering and equipping them to do it. And finally, please complete the work. A lot of times we start, but we don't close. My friends, you can do anything in your life as long as you realize this. It is not a desire to succeed alone that will get you there. It is the ability to focus on that objective, because it's not desire. Everybody wants something, but only a handful of people will focus to get it. Jeff?
All right, we'll go to the next slide. We're ending. We're coming around third base here. So you're in your workplace. How in the world do you pivot in your workplace? Hey, Fred and I believe you should unleash your pivot on your workplace. How do you do that? Become a person of action and ideas on workforce issues. Listen, there's no better time to reinvent yourself as an internal consultant. We use the term an intrapreneur, where you can talk with folks in your organization about what the world of work could or should look like in your place of employment. Second, commit to the concept of precision engagement. Look, embrace and practice peer recognition. That's super important. You want to make sure that others are being recognized for the work they do. And finally, just challenge yourself and others. Become not only pivotal to others, but pivotal to the growth of your organization. Next slide. To maximize a pivot, we say there's three things you should do. Pursue energy instead of just passion. Figure out where your energy is and your passion will align. And call out and embrace your best self. You and I have the opportunity to show up in a better place, and we can do that when we embrace our best self and recognize the gift of being a follower, as I said earlier, before you're serving as a leader. We all can do that by being more pivotal to the organization. That really is a missing link to our advancement. So the next slide, we'll bring them all up. It's a real quick review. We think there's, again, a couple things you can do. Just protect your wellness. Make sure you are prepared to pivot. Be sure that you're discovering and you are working and walking in the purpose of your pivot, the objectives of your pivot, and embrace and call out those 4 steps to pivoting and amp your pivot up, man. Pivot with power. And finally, use your workplace challenges as opportunities to showcase that you can do more, accomplish more, and give more. All of us have the opportunity to do that. On that note, we go to the next slide. It's a quick thank you slide. We're ready to take your questions. And then finally, Evan, if you go to our last slide, it's contact information. You can bring up all that stuff for Dr. Soto and I, and we are open to your questions, thoughts, and ideas. Thank you guys so much.
Let's try that again. There's my mic. I have to commend you guys on your ability to bring this home with some speed under some circumstances, but a little bit off. So thank you both. There's so much interesting content here. And I have one question that came through that's talking about there's so many steps you can take, so many actions to take, so much preparation here. And the question was, I may know all of these steps I need to take, but how do I handle that internal concern and pressure when everything seems to be falling apart? So I think the idea here is, especially maybe in this time when we're feeling stressed, we may know what to do, but sometimes there's just that difficulty in knowing it's time to act.
Yeah, Fred, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think a lot of times we become confused with circumstances, what's real and what isn't. Most of the circumstances we find ourselves in are very real, but they're not permanent. It's not so much what the problem is, but it's how you relate to the problem. My friend, I've been hungry. As a youth, I thought I knew more than my parents. I left home. I was on the street. And I realized that things like food, shelter, and a place to go home to, that these things were like not automatic. But if you go back to basics and realize, count your blessings, but never lose sight of where you want to go. There are a lot of people who are suffering now. But let me tell you about suffering that I can tell you as it applies to me. It is in suffering where I have learned to ascend to the knowledge, to rise to the expectation. Now, that may sound like, oh, yeah, that's a bunch of motivational stuff, but it's extremely real. One final point: you cannot get through anything on your own. This is the biggest problem. We're trying to think it through, we're trying to do it through, and we're trying to do it alone. I have been blessed with many advisors, but I had to become teachable. I've been blessed with a few great relationships. One of them is the other guy on this call, Jeffrey Vargas. I trust Jeffrey, but that comes with time. I go to Jeffrey, and you should go to Jeffrey too, because I think he's a great guy and he's trustworthy. So, a few thoughts. This is not the end of this conversation. That's why we give our address, because some of you may want to follow up. I'm not afraid to do that. I'm here because I really, really, really want to see the people around me succeed. Jeff?
Awesome, awesome. We're just super excited to support Prospanica, you, Evan, and the leadership team. If you have another question, we can take it however you want to roll, my man.
Yeah, I got one more question I think we have time for. Someone was saying if you have a leader in your organization that is taking credit for your success in leading an important, meaningful pivot, what's your response? Is it time to move on? How else could you handle that situation?
I'll give you a quick one, and then Fred may want to jump in. There was a time when I was at the Department of Energy, I was called a shadow speechwriter. So I was writing speeches for the Secretary of Energy and got no credit. You would write it as a shadow speechwriter, give it to the political would give it to the secretary, and then you'd watch it on C-SPAN, CNN, and everywhere else. Here's the reality: if you're doing great work, as Fred identified, even though someone tries to take credit for the work that you do, they don't have the capacity to do it fully. Why is that? Because your ability to show up and do great work shows out in many places that you may not even think people are seeing and paying attention to the work that you do. The question is, how do you want to amplify yourself in a way that's respectful to the organization, but at the same time allows you the sunshine that you deserve? So I think it's a question of deciding and then implementing. What does that first step look like, which is marketing yourself to some degree. Fred, what else would you add?
My job has been to help others look better. One thing I had to do is let go of my ego, that I had to get credit, that I had to be the shining light. No, our jobs are to help other people to succeed. But remember what I said earlier, that last step: share what you do, share what you know. Because I'm here to tell you, in leadership, the best leaders, they really know who's doing it. They know that that leader doesn't know anything. That leader is not expected to know anything because they have great people like us. So we need to rise to the knowledge, rise to the occasion, and just show up. Believe me, the time will come. Don't get hung up in little projects. Don't lose sight of the big picture. Adelante, gente.
Outstanding. A beautiful way to end. Jeff and Fred, thank you both so much for the content. It's so much to share in just 30 minutes. I really appreciate your bringing all this to us. Everyone, you're going to get a copy of these slides afterwards. You'll also see there's some resource slides they've included that will help you pursue some more of this a little bit further. Please, as we close, take 2 minutes to fill out our survey. That helps us know what's working, what isn't working, and it tells us more what you want to talk about. Next Cafecito, next Wednesday, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this idea of perspective. We can feel very much like we get trapped as times get tougher and more difficult in seeing things through a certain single lens. This is going to help us open that up. We'll be with Michael Landers. He was at our conference last year. He's amazing. It's going to be interactive, a dialogue, so join us. Thank you to everyone for making the time today, especially Fred and Jeff. Have a great week, everybody. Stay home and stay safe and stay in touch. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Blessings.